Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls all around the world. It is your favorite movie based list podcast, 1021, back again. I'm one of your hosts, Josh. Josh, joined as always. I can't believe I almost messed up my own name. Joined as always um, by the person who is consistently waiting for the return of the king, Jen.
I'm always waiting for the return of the king. I mean, who
And we
isn't?
don't mean Elvis.
No, we don't mean Elvis. No, 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 no. Something a little bit more earthy. Middle earthy.
Yeah, the Middle Earth,
We
not
mi-
not the bottom Earth.
no, not the bottom earth. So I sort of have podcast news to share.
What? What? What?
Um, in my quest to make my list this week, I put it into a digital file and then proceeded to erase the digital file. So it's a good thing that I remember my list because otherwise we would be in big trouble. But yeah, uh, this is what happens when you don't use pen and paper. See, too many weird things can happen. So yeah, from now on, I'm definitely going to have to make a copy of my list.
Well, what I do is log into my Letterboxd account, go to the list section, create new list, and start adding there, and it takes care of the rest for me. Give us money.
Such a smart idea.
And then when it's showtime, I add the movies we talked about to our own individual lists on our 1021 account. That's 1021 pod for Letterboxd if you want to give us a follow. Uh, and there you'll find all of our lists. Give us money.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's how I do it.
It feels pretty insane, actually, that you know you spend all this time making a list, and then the list just up and disappears. It's just not fair.
It's gone.
I did actually agonize about this earlier and was like, "Oh my god, what is going on? What happened? Where did my file go?" But yeah, whatever. It's gone. We won't cry over spilled resurrections.
Spilled Resurrections. Speaking
Yes.
of which, this past weekend was a big holiday in the Christian world, and I decided we should piggyback off that and do our lists about movie resurrections. People that come back from the dead in movies seem to tie in timeline wise with the calendar. And I thought, hey, that'd be a pretty interesting idea. And that's what we did this week. You like that
And
transition? It was pretty
it
smooth.
was hard. I
Yeah,
didn't think it was going to be as hard as it was, but it was hard.
I finished my list maybe an hour ago,
Oh, wow.
and a lot of it had to do with the were they dead or were they kind of dead? And sometimes it turns out they weren't dead. They were just mostly dead.
Hey, that's on my list.
That's on your list.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm quite the predictor, I guess. I'm sure there's another word for that. So, yeah, that's what our lists are about tonight. Jen, you want to start us off, or do you want me to?
I guess I could start off.
All right, you're number 10.
All
Let's get
right,
us
my
going.
number 10 features none other than the action hero, uh, younger John Wick. No, just kidding. Although it's the same actor. My number 10 is a little movie called The Matrix. This one was kind of weird for me because I do feel like Neo came back from the dead, but honestly, I have so many questions about it, and it's one of those like loops of philosophy that make my head hurt. Like if he's in the Matrix and he dies, but he's not really in the Matrix because he's alive, does that actually count? Did he actually die? Uh like I have a lot of questions. I mean, like I really have a lot of questions. But Neo definitely does come back, at least from the Matrix standpoint of, hey, you know what? Everybody's dead, and or everybody can die, and then somehow Neo comes back. So I chose the Matrix because it felt like it was ambiguous enough that he did really technically come back. I don't know. What's your opinion on that, Josh? Did he really come back?
Well, I will give my opinion when it comes up on my list because we have crossover.
Okay, well, I won't go too far into it. I will just say that Neo Neo being that coming back to life for Neo makes me again, gives me a lot of questions, makes me feel kind of weird. Um but also I don't know, somehow kind of makes me feel um like if that's possible, everything is possible in that world. um I don't know, there's something weird though, which when we get to it on your list, let's have a discussion because I really do think that it bears some investigation by us both. So I'll just leave it at that. So number 10 is the Matrix, and specifically it's Neo that comes back from the dead.
Well, as I mentioned, I find it a worthwhile entry because there's some crossover. So, and I'll hop into my number 10. Now, my number 10 is a movie that we've talked about on this show before. So I'll keep things relatively brief and just say it's 2008's Ghost Town with Ricky Gervais.
Oh yeah.
Not only is it a movie about seeing dead people, but the whole thing is it's built on the fact that he dies first, and that's kind of how he gets the ability to see dead people. He dies, and suddenly he can see dead people. That's pretty much the gist of it. Is it one of those movies that you're gonna remember forever as a instant classic? No, not by any means. But it's an enjoyable watch, and his quote unquote resurrection sets up the whole thing. So, as far as movie resurrections go, I'd say this one's pretty doggone important to the movie. So, my number 10 is Ghost Town.
Nice. Well, my number 9, it's not the protagonist that actually comes back from the dead. It's the fact that our protagonist brings people back from the dead. And I have to say that although this movie was super crazy and probably not what I would have done, I love this comic series. It is absolutely amazing. It's called Jonah Hex. Jonah Hex is basically a Confederate soldier who is what's a good word for Jonah Hex? Well, he's a bounty hunter, but he has the unique ability of grabbing a corpse and he can bring it back to life. It's sort of crazy. And the movie does a pretty good job of showing us exactly what he can do, but I feel like it gets kind of confusing and you might not understand exactly how it happens. The movie um doesn't really make it super clear. Although it's I mean it's not bad. And most people who watched Jonah Hex the movie watched it for Megan Fox, but the story is pretty good. So, for its resurrection themes and its ability to actually show somebody who has the power to, yeah, talk to the dead. Yeah, I'm gonna give Jonah Hex my number 9 position. I don't know if have you ever seen Jonah Hex?
I haven't, but I'm familiar with the character because the Legends of Tomorrow uh, teamed up with them a couple of times.
That's right. That's right. He's definitely a really weird character. Like he's such an outlying character. Um but it's actually kind of cool. Like he's got his Jonah Hex's ability to do certain things is like one of those. Like I said, it's very outlying. Not many people are super familiar um with his specific with his particular brand of powers. Let's just say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But if you watch the movie, you do get a pretty overall sense of, kind of what his whole character arc is about. I don't know. I feel like they made him super tough and they made him, kind of mean and terrible, but then they also kind of made it pretty clear that there's a lot going on for this particular character. Um, yeah, and I mean this was like as close to a superhero movie as I could possibly get. I couldn't actually think of, I mean, because there's a whole bunch of superheroes that come back from the dead, for all kinds of different reasons, but I kind of didn't want to do the superhero route. But Jonah Hex feels like, okay, that's different. So, so number 9, Jonah Hex.
Excellent choice. Very unique.
Oh yeah. Oh wait, the other thing. Wait, I forgot to say. The other thing is, he not only can he bring people back from the dead, thereby resurrecting them, he also compels them to tell the truth. So he sort of is like, he's got like the Wonder Woman golden lasso hands, where when you bring somebody back from the dead, you got to tell them the truth. That's kind of cool.
Well, if somebody brought me back from the dead, I'd probably be inclined to go. Yeah, I don't want to go back to the other side. So, yeah, what do you want to know?
And I heard through the grapevine that Jonah Hex was um, that there's some kind of plan for Jonah Hex coming up. So maybe we'll see something new. Who knows? That
Now
could be
with
fun.
James Gunn, you never know.
Yeah, right? You really, seriously, you don't know.
So my number 9, I'm going to be so brief that you're
That we're gonna think your
probably
underwear.
yes, yes, that's exactly right. And I'm only going to be brief because I have a feeling, oh, just call it a hunch, that it might be on your list.
You think? Okay.
Quite possibly. I'm gonna be honest here. I was running low on available pulls for my list,
Oh no.
and I added this. And don't get me wrong, the movie is very enjoyable and definitely worth any kind of watch. But I definitely don't feel as qualified to really break it down as you. So,
Okay.
with that being said, my number 9 is The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
Oh. Okay.
And
Now this one didn't make it to my list.
what?
Yeah, it didn't make it to my list, and I can explain why right now, why I don't think it made it to my list, if you like. But I can also tell you what happened with Gandalf, and that might sort of give you the idea of why it didn't make it to my list.
Okay, just for clarification's purpose, we're talking, you know, Gandalf the Grey dies and
Correct.
returns as,
Gandalf the White.
which is coming back from the dead. But
Correct.
apparently there
Sort
is
of.
more to this story.
So, okay, well, without doing like an entire dissertation about, Tolkien mythology and all this kind of stuff, I will say that Gandalf, although Gandalf is basically immortal anyway, and so although the mortal body that he possessed was sent to Middle Earth to do a job, his mortality was never in question, really. And so as I didn't put it on my list because I feel like in order to be resurrected, there has to be an actual permanent death. And at no time was there ever a situation where Gandalf couldn't have come back in some shape or form. It's always that's just the nature of who Gandalf is, who all of them are. So all of the who we know as the wizards in Middle Earth, they're all sort of part of the same group. They all have the same capabilities. And it's one of the reasons that it well, I won't go too far into that, but it definitely to me didn't feel like that was true, like the stakes just weren't high enough there.
Would you say for um, the Lord of the Rings layman that it would be maybe perceived as actual death?
Yeah, I think if you watched the Peter Jackson movies, you would absolutely just think, okay, he just died.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that would absolutely be the right understanding of how they presented it in the movies. But then if you know enough about Tolkien and Middle Earth mythology, then you sort of start feeling something a little bit different.
Kind
And
of
I
like
and
explaining the magic trick.
yeah, a little bit. But also, you know, there's also other issues and aspects because like remember the elves and how the elves say that they're immortal,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not technically immortal in the sense that they can die. They're hard to kill, but they can die. But as long as they live, they will live forever. And that makes it's always difficult to sort of get in between, well, what does immortality mean and what does the idea of no but elves can also die mean, and it's sort of in the same vein. And that's why I felt like it was just both too complicated and also just not the stakes just aren't high enough there.
Okay, I get why you didn't put it on your list now, but
But I think it does make sense to anybody who's just seen the movies. It totally makes sense. Gandalf dies in the movies.
I've read the books. The main trilogy and The Hobbit. I haven't read any supplemental material, but going strictly from the movie standpoint, that's why I made it my number 9.
It's a good choice. It actually is a good choice. If I was thinking that, if that was the way that I was thinking, I definitely would be like, yeah, that is 100% a good choice.
Here I was thinking any reason to get Lord of the Rings on a list, Jen's gonna take it.
I know, right? I actually I should have thought of that. I totally should have thought of that, but no, I did not.
It's like me with Kevin Smith.
Yeah, I'll talk about Lord of the Rings later. I promise.
Okay.
All right. So my number 8 movie. I have to wonder how many people will even remember this movie that aren't over the age of 40. Um okay, the person who gets resurrected is Alex Murphy. The movie in which Alex Murphy is a character is RoboCop. Um Basically they take Alex Murphy's entire body and turn him into an organic super cop. But he's all robot. I gotta say, I super love this idea of resurrecting Alex and turning him into the perfect law enforcement agent. Um, because I feel like this is sort of a quintessential um, topic that we keep trying to figure out. We have we have robots that do sentry duty now, that stand in place of guards and stuff and act as perimeter um, sentinels and things like that. I mean, we keep trying to do things like this, and I feel like this is not even all that much further into the future before we tried something like this. Hopefully, not as a cop, but anyway, there's something really sad about the way that he comes back, though. I mean, I don't know if have you seen RoboCop, Josh?
Have I seen RoboCop?
I'm guessing that's a yes.
That is very much a yes. And I have to once again say we have crossover.
Does this movie make you sad?
In a way, yeah. Because there's always the thought about, what has to be left behind in the transition from Alex Murphy to RoboCop.
Right. And the way, to me, it's the way that he's considered company uh property
Yeah.
instead of being just a human being, whatever vestiges are left. And it just, oh man, it's so sad. But this was a great action movie. This was a fabulous idea. And again, it just makes me think that, like, yeah, okay, we're not that far away from this. Yep, we could definitely, from a morality standpoint, I could definitely see that this is something that we would do. Well, you were dead, so now we just made you not dead. Oof,
A little
painful.
gratitude would be nice.
So painful. This whole thing is so painful. And also, I really like the fact that they didn't. That it was almost like they didn't even make a big deal about him dying. It was just like, okay, he's dead. Well, what can we do with his parts? I mean, like, oh, just hits you in the feels. I swear. So number 8 for me is a RoboCop.
I gotta be honest, I didn't see that one coming from you.
No, you didn't think I would
No,
pick that?
no.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's also on my list. So I will talk about it just a tad bit later on.
Expand on that one. Yes, I'd love to hear what you've got to say about that.
As it stands, we're at my number 8. And I've noticed that on my list there are like just a lot of franchises.
that seems to be where they need to do the resurrections, though, because once you kill off your main character, you're kind of done. So yeah,
Unless you bring them back.
Unless you bring them back.
Which is what they did in this movie, 2007's Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End.
Oh, good choice.
Now, I know this one particular movie gets a lot of flack for not being as good as, say, the first two, and that's fine. It has some of my favorite scenes from the series, including the vote, the voting scene. Jack surprises himself. Is I didn't see that coming either.
Yep.
But when it comes to the resurrection, the opening of the movie with Jack Sparrow and Davy Jones' locker, he is just absolutely losing his mind, lost his mind, or just being Jack Sparrow. It's hard to tell, especially since he's always displayed as a character of chaos. And much like Lord of the Rings, there are a lot of supplemental materials that really flesh out why he is the way he is and why the government wants him, shut down so bad. Spoilers, it involves trying to bust up the slave trade. So he's, although a pirate, an honorable man altogether. But the crew had to journey down to Davy Jones' locker to rescue him. hence his resurrection. And not only did Jack get resurrection, but so did his precious pearl. Seeing the flippity flip, I guess that's a weird way to put it, but going from the locker to the land of the living in transition was, I think, a fun visual for a theater experience, and that's kind of what you need when you head out to the cinema. You want to see interesting visuals that look grand on a big screen. That's one of my favorite things about going to the movies. But Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, while not the best in the series, had a truly memorable resurrection with Jack Sparrow, and that's why it's my number 8.
Nice. I almost picked that, but didn't. I don't know. That's definitely a strong contender.
You do like ships,
I do, yeah.
and this one had a ship coming back to life.
Yeah, no kidding. That's kind of weird, isn't it?
That resurrection was almost as triumphant as Jack's himself.
Yeah, and I don't know. Was he actually dead? I don't know. Anyway, all right. I won't even get into that. I'm going to jump into a movie where somebody really dies. They die by being electrocuted. And oh boy, this one is crazy. So when did this movie come out? I think it came out in 2015. Okay, so in 2015, this movie comes out and it's called I'm not going to pull any punches with the title, The Lazarus Effect. And as a movie about the Lazarus Effect, you might assume that somebody would come back from the dead. And yes, indeed, they absolutely did come back from the dead. This girl named Zoe, they're working on a formula to do exactly what they set out to do, which is bring people. It's bring people back from the dead, but it's more than that. It's like, anyway, I won't get too far into it. Let's just say that they're trying to create a serum that will do exactly what is going to happen, which is bring people back from the dead. Weird things happen when they try it out on the dog first, and it was like a cautionary kind of a thing, but then an accident happens, and Zoe, the character that eventually gets resurrected, is basically electrocuted fatally. Okay, so they give her the serum, and despite the fact that nobody else on the team wants to, because of course nobody's going to listen, they bring her back, and she claims that she goes to hell, or that a version of herself went to hell, and more crazy things begin to happen. She exhibits telekinesis, she gets telepathy, she gets more and more. Basically, her personality turns into hyper aggressive, and I won't tell you what happens in the end, but crazy stuff happens in this movie. Absolutely crazy stuff. It's actually really good in the sense that, like, if you just sort of turn off any ideas about, hey, everything's got to make sense, then it's really good. It didn't do very well with critics, but I liked it. I actually liked it, and it did fairly well at the box office too. So my number 7 movie is The Lazarus Effect.
I have not seen it.
Pretty good, actually. Not bad at all.
Okay, so my number 7, also a franchise, and also one that is not exactly fondly looked at, if I'm going to be perfectly honest.
Uh-oh.
It is Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. And I know, there's some people out there that say it's not canon, Brandon. And some people say it's just garbage. Everybody But you know what? There are some things that, I thought were enjoyable. The the big battle where Ray kind of gives everything to kind of best Palpatine, who also somehow returned. And that's a quote. And how did they put it? She gave all of her life force to kind of rid the galaxy of the great evil once and for all. And that drained her so much that she dies. She dies. But luckily, there's a not quite super duper reformed Kylo Ren who has kind of shied away from the Kylo Ren thing and he kind of just, you can say he's been again. And he does this force thingy and gives his own life force to bring her back. And ta-da, she's resurrected. Now that I'm thinking about this, and how the scene plays out, I can't help but think, okay, it does seem a bit contrived, I guess. The way it shows him holding her, and excuse me, the way it shows him holding her, and the way he
Are you okay?
Hi, I am alive. So he's holding her, giving her his life force, and then she opens her eyes, and then he just falls over dead. It seems very anticlimactic. I feel like I'm about to fall over at this point. But yeah, it's not the best Star Wars, and it's kind of weird how this power just it's conveniently available now, right when you need it.
Oh God.
But I'm one of the three people that enjoyed Ray as a character, and I'm going to go ahead and blame that on Parenthood because I had in 2019, 4 years ago, some elementary aged children that I think really benefited from seeing new Star Wars movies with a strong female character. I mean, Princess Leia will always be the strongest female character, but to see a young, fresh Force user, it impacted my kids. I know that sounds very emotional because I'm trying not to, clear my throat as I'm, talking to the microphone. But yeah, that's I think really the biggest impact for me was just seeing how the existence of Ray was felt by my own younglings. Right, it was nice to be able to show them that.
Well, I have good news for you if you like Rey. Apparently, Rey is a big part of the next Star Wars storyline.
And I couldn't be happier. Honestly, I've been saying forever, you know what? we need to find out what happens next. And instead, we're getting so many chapters between the chapters that it's just tiring having to go back in time all the time.
Yeah.
I want to know
Yeah.
what the next chapter is. What's everybody doing now?
Yeah. I totally agree.
So yeah,
So
I'm looking forward to this.
so one of our 10 to 1 podcasts needs to be our top 10 Star Wars storylines from and we'll just basically have a ton of crossover, but we'll just rank them 1 to 10 and see how that works. That would be fun.
I think so too.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
No. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker is my number 7.
All right. First of all, great. That's a great choice. I really like that, and I didn't even think of that actually. Should have thought of that, but I didn't because I was too busy thinking of my next movie, which actually is a really fun movie to watch, even though it makes zero sense altogether. Still, I don't care. It was fun. It was done in 1990. It was called Flatliners. Flatliners is basically the premise goes like this: a group of college students decide that they are going to kill each other or kill themselves, and then bring themselves back from the dead after a very certain amount of time. And what ends up happening is two of them do this, and they are then followed by their past sins, I think is maybe the best way to say it. It kind of starts out being sort of scary, like, oh, maybe something followed them back from the dead. But then it kind of turns out that they just needed to make peace with their past transgressions. Kind of a weird message, a little bit odd in terms of turning your sins into actual corporeal form, but quite interesting. Very interesting. Flatliners starred Kiefer Sutherland, who at the time was just like everywhere and everybody loved him. Because of course, Lost Boys. And Flatliners did something that I think a lot of people always sort of like wonder about, which is, hey, if I have an experience in death, does that mean that somehow I'm changed on the other side of it? Like, changed, like, am I a different person? And I feel like the movie tried to explain that kind of idea, but it didn't exactly work, right? I mean, while the character, who's our sort of main character, uh, Nelson, Nelson, while he's dead, he he kind of says that he like discovered an afterlife, right? But was it really the afterlife, or was it just the combination of all the things that he had done wrong or felt like he had done wrong, including his guilt? Um and I I don't know if they meant to do this, but the next person who goes flatline, no heartbeat, has this erotic experience in the afterlife. And it's like, well, like, that was his past sin, that was his deadly sin. It was He was, a ladies man in the present day. That was who he was. So his afterlife showed him that, like, as if like you have to die in order to understand what you've done wrong in your life, and then when you come back, then you get a chance to sort of make amends for it. But you got to really make amends for it, because most of the people who go through this process end up so messed up that they aren't able to come back from it. And it's like really uh kind of icky. I mean, that maybe that isn't super descriptive, but it doesn't make you feel like there's um anything good that can happen. It's It's I don't know. I'm a little bit struggling because I feel like the message is sort of all over the place with this movie, but it doesn't end with anything that I feel like is the concrete, or even a little bit of a firm idea of what it was that we're supposed to take away from the movie. Is it that we're just supposed to behave really well in life because, see, if we don't, the afterlife will follow us? Or is it, hey, you never know if you die and then you come back, your afterlife will follow you? It was just kind of murky in that sense, but it was still fun. It was a fun movie in the sense that um just the idea of having people come back from death and then having to atone for all the things that they have done in their life, like it was a big life lesson, did kind of feel like, yeah, this is there's some kind of preaching going on here. And it was interesting. It was very interesting, but from a resurrection standpoint, you don't get much better than Flatliners, in the sense that you're dead and then somebody brings you back from the dead. So, Flatliners is my number 6.
I almost added it to my list. That was one of my almost movies.
Oh
After
yeah.
all, it is a movie about killing people and bringing them back.
Yeah, exactly.
But I thought against it. I decided against it.
Really?
And not because it's not worthy of a spot on the list, because yeah, I mean, I saw that movie when I was very, very young. And that's really the reason why I didn't add it to my list, because I haven't seen it in such a long time that I can't really remember it all that well. I do remember the visuals were very, very striking, especially when it comes to being on the other side, the shadows and the black and the blue.
Yeah.
It's all very intense, and I was probably too young to watch it, to be honest.
I feel like for a lot of us, we were too young to watch that movie because I remember it being really scary. And then when I went
Hmm.
back to watch it not that long ago, a couple of years ago, I was like, Why did I ever think this was scary?" I mean, there's some jump scares, but is this scary? No. Was it confusing? Yes, yes, it was.
So excellent choice there.
Thank you, thank you. And so, where are you? You are at number 6.
My number 6. It is one that might draw the ire of some fans, but to me, it is still one of my favorite Death and Returns, and that is of the boy, ironically named The Boy Who Lived.
Oh no.
Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, 2011. Everybody knows the story of Harry Potter. Don't need to go into that. But like I said, carried the moniker The Boy Who Lived until he didn't. So he got to spend a little time on the other side, hanging out with Gandalf. I mean, Albus. Oops, did I say that? And, you know, it was one of those things where, nope, not your time. You have to rise up, defeat evil. That's sort of your whole reason for being here. You know, Harry finds out that to defeat Voldemort, he had to die. Nobody said anything about staying dead. So he comes back and does the triumph thing. The, the prophecy is fulfilled, and they live happily ever after, except for Ron and Hermione, who probably never should have been together to begin with. Can't imagine they have a marriage filled with love and laughter.
God.
I'm sorry, that's a bit more of a tangent than I needed to go on there. But
Hmm.
yeah, they tell this tale over the course of 7 movies. And was it 7 movies or 8?
I think it was 7.
I never remember because I know this was broken up into 2 parts, and it's like, how many years are this? You do that plus 1. Math. I'm not going to do math. Not to watch movies. Anyway, they crafted the story ever since Harry was a younger man into, the age that he was when he died. And we've been following through these films his growth as not only as a person but a hero, and he gradually became less completely reliant on every single person around him to get things done, and learned how to take care of a couple things himself, but still ultimately relied on his friends, and that was the true magic. Friendship, right? So Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 is my number 6.
Good choice. Very good choice. Although that is definitely not one that I would have thought of just because I wasn't thinking about it that way. Okay, my number 5 is a movie that I don't know if anybody has ever even heard of, because it was kind of a, like, I don't know, sleeper horror movie. But the movie is called Tamara. And Tamara is I don't know why I like this movie so much. I mean, like, honestly, it really doesn't have anything wholesome or redemptive in it. The premise goes like this. Tamara she's super smart, and she also is into witchcraft. And basically, um let's just say that people really pick on her a lot. And it's not really it's kind of like, it's one of those situations where it's like, even when she doesn't know it, people are definitely not being nice to her. I guess that's maybe the best way to say it. And so a group of kids decide to try to play a prank on Tamara. And when they do try to play the prank on her, it ends up backfiring and they accidentally kill her. Dun dun. Okay, so one of the kids says, "No, we got to call the cops. We got to call the cops." No, they don't call the cops. They blackmail this kid into saying, "Yeah, okay, fine. We'll just go bury her." And they go and they bury her. But the very next day, guess who walks into class? It's Tamara. And basically, yeah, no, it's not very good. She's clearly out for revenge, and the body count begins to pile up. Um, it's an interesting story. It's actually very interesting. And definitely a bit unconventional. I think the reason that I liked this is that it is sort like, she definitely manifested this herself. And I kind of like that because it's not like her resurrection was like dependent upon something else, or no, I shouldn't say something else, somebody else. She definitely, you could tell that, like, the whole story premise here is she was powerful enough to orchestrate her own resurrection, which in my book is pretty powerful. Even for a lot of very supernatural kind of things, this one definitely ranks way up there. So, uh, yeah, there's not a lot to the story, but what there is pretty good. And for a Saturday night popcorn flick, this is definitely one of my favorites to kind of go back to. So, Tamara, 2005, and The Witch That Comes Back from the Dead.
Interesting. I have another one I haven't seen, but it does sound intriguing.
It's fun. It's a very fun movie.
Well, we're going to get cracking into my top 5 with, believe it or not, a franchise movie.
No.
Yeah, surprising.
Wow. It's such a change.
Really, especially since I've been, hoisting up all of these smaller independent features like Star
Yeah.
Wars. So my number 5 is Avengers Endgame. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, it wasn't Infinity War. The snapping happened in Infinity War. Well, yes, but this is about resurrections. And the unsnapping happened in Endgame. So when it comes to mass resurrections, it doesn't get much bigger than the, trillions of beings that met their doom thanks to Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet. But one snap from Tony Stark from Iron Man brought them all back. And they came back badder than ever, ready to go. I'm probably getting this all wrong, because they were already back by the time Tony had the gun. Was it the Hulk that was back? Was it the Hulk? I'm probably going to get yelled at by, people that know what they're talking about. So, okay, so yeah, I'm probably getting everything mixed up. My apologies. I'm sorry. I'm at least fessing up. Okay, you can take my
The
nerd
Hulk
card.
the Hulk uses the
Use it
stones to
first.
bring everyone back.
And
Right.
that's how we got injured. That's why he has his arm in a sling. Everybody comes back. The point is, everybody comes back. They're resurrected by the Hulk. Tony uses it to get rid of Thanos and his army. That's right.
Although Thanos then jumps forward in time, and that's what sets up the next movie.
So just from sheer volume alone, not just the iconic characters that we see make their return, but the volume of the resurrection makes this worthy of not only the list, but a top 5. At number 5, Avengers Endgame.
Nice. Very nice. Okay. My number 4. My number 4 is a movie that probably everyone knows about and will probably cringe when I say it. It is a movie that actually we quote in this household quite often whenever we think that something is unjust. We hold up our pretend uh, scalpel and say, "No fair, no fair." I am talking 100% about Pet Cemetery, and Pet Cemetery is the story where there is a cemetery where you can go to bury your crazy pets that you really didn't want to lose, and they come back from the dead, but they're scary and they're horrible. And so, of course, someone thinks, let's go bury people up there, despite the fact that everyone says, no, the ground is sour, don't bury people there. But grief does weird things to people, and so they try to bury a little kid up there. And of course, the little kid comes back, and he is 1,000 times scarier than any pet that's come back because, he has mental capacity. And this little kid runs around terrorizing people, kills a couple, and then eventually gets killed himself. But that doesn't stop there. No, it doesn't stop there. The person who crazily put this kid in the ground also then decides, well, it didn't work one time, but that's just because I waited too long. So let's try this again. And at the end of the movie, yes, he tries it again. And yeah, the results haven't really changed at all. And it's still just as scary. And I think the moral of this story is please don't bury people in old Native American burial plots or, scary cursed land where people already have told you a billion times, no, don't bury people there. I mean, listen, if somebody comes to you and says, I know a way to bring somebody back from the dead, I would say don't do that. So there you go. That's what I would say. So that's my number 4, Pet Cemetery.
Pet Cemetery, another Stephen King classic. At least I think so. Let's see. We are at my number 4. My number 4 is our first crossover of the night with The Matrix. That's right. The Matrix is my number 4. We talked about it a little bit before. And I will say this as an addendum to Jen. Yes, Neo, he died. They saw him shaking in the real world and go, bah, just, we lost him. He's gone. Maybe he wasn't the chosen after all. Chump. Okay, they were a little more gracious with the loss of their hero. But what it all really amounts to is it's the power of love that brought him back. And Trinity's like, but you are the one, because I was told that I would fall in love with the one, and that's you, my dude. That's you. And Neo's like, I don't know, being chill on the other side, going, she likes me. She really likes me. Hold on, let me go back to my body in the Matrix and, do this super cool, I see the code and I understand there is no spoon and da 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 da. And yeah, comes back swinging, takes down
He comes
the bad
back.
guys.
He comes back aware, and I'm using that word very purposefully. Aware, and I'm always surprised, and that's why I always wonder if he actually really did come back. I mean, not that he didn't come back, but I always wonder if maybe it was this just a metaphor that he was asleep and he woke up, or did he actually die? I don't know. I always have a problem with this.
As the Flowbot said, he saw the strings that controlled the system.
Right. So did he just wake up?
Well, I go by the the reactions of everybody was, dude's dead.
But
We're
they
screwed.
could have been in the Super Matrix. In which case, no, none of them were dead, because this is just the Matrix in the Matrix. And now you know why I have such a hard time with this, because I have existential crises every time I try to think about this. I mean, it's like Schrodinger's Matrix. If you're in the Matrix and you're not aware, then you are in the Matrix. But if you are in the Matrix and you are aware, then you're in the Matrix in the Matrix.
Blowing my mind now, man.
I mean, I didn't even get to the Animatrix, but okay. Anyway,
Love the
proceed.
Matrix.
Proceed.
It's unfortunate that they made more movies, because then they kind of had to forget just how powerful Neo is supposed to be.
Yeah, so like he forgets.
Just so we could be vulnerable again. I do, I'm again one of the 4 people that saw the new Matrix and really enjoyed the whole meta commentary about how much they didn't want to make the movie. I thought that was my favorite part. Just realizing that it seemed like they took actual conversations that they must have had with studio executives about what should we do with the Matrix next. Like, why do we got to do anything with it? It seems all kind of redundant and a cash grab. And the studio's like, yeah, and so just the fact that in the movies are referenced as a game. So, what it all boils down to is having the conversation about we don't need another part to the game plays into the director saying we really don't need another Matrix movie. And of course that became going to speculation land here now. The studio saying, well, if you won't do it, we're going to do it. So you can be a part of it or not. And they're like, well, if you're so hell bent on destroying our brainchild, well, we're going to do it. So that's what they did. They took the Matrix down, sent it to the ground burning. That's what I think that last movie intentionally did for the franchise. And if they would have left it at one, left Neo's, you know, Christ-like resurrection stand, um, it would have been a nice sort of allegory, modern day fable, to look back on as an amazing piece of cinema. It still holds up as a good movie. It's just, again, the sequels didn't do anything to the world or the story that needed to be done, in my opinion. With that being said, The Matrix is my number 4, and yeah, Jen had it perfect.
I mean, it's a good movie. It's definitely a good movie, and it does stand by itself. I completely agree with that. It does. Um. Okay. This movie that I am gonna talk about right now is definitely one of the ones that like stands out in my mind as being one of the creepiest and one of the most difficult movies to watch. Um, because when you know what happens to the actor, it gives you a different perspective. My number 3 is a movie called The Crow. And it starred Brendan Lee, and of course Brendan Lee died. And it I mean, it's hard to even watch that movie and not feel like, man, this is, you're watching something that you feel almost like you shouldn't be watching it, but the movie itself stands on its own. Um, the Crow is basically based on, it's a revenge story. He and his girlfriend, fiance, I think, are murdered, and years later, or a year later, um, we see the gravestone of the guy's name is Eric, and a crow is on it, and the crow basically taps on his grave and resurrects him. And then he goes on a revenge plight. And it's an interesting. I mean, okay. So I'm gonna liken this to another movie which didn't make it to my list because it is all kinds of weird, and I've talked about it before. But The Crow is kind of like the movie The Wraith, where these people run over this guy, and then he basically comes back as kind of like a spirit, but with a really cool car and a motorcycle, and he can run people down, right? And that's what he does. He goes on a revenge tour to avenge his death. And The Crow is sort of similar, but it feels like there's a little bit stronger of a story happening in The Crow, because even though it's very violent and very, terrible, Eric as a character, it to me it feels like his quest for revenge is even more like it's such an incredibly powerful directive that his spirit has, that it's the power is so strong that it didn't even really require anything too massively supernatural except for the crow. And that his need to find justice so that his spirit can rest was so enormous that it literally brought him back from the dead. And I do kind of like that, because sometimes I feel like we convolute the ideas of supernatural powers with all kinds of other things instead of being self manifest. And that's what I feel like The Crow gets right. It's like it is a it's a destiny that needs to happen in order for him to be at peace again with his fiance, because in the end, there's that reconciliation and their spirits get to be together. And that, I feel like, is, that's the just and right cause. But all the stuff that happens in between also feels like senseless retribution. And I'm not saying that these people shouldn't have gotten justice, but wow, it is a lot of, this is a revenge fantasy tour happening here. Stylistically, The Crow is amazing. I mean, it's such an awesome movie. It's just absolutely gorgeous from top to bottom. The lighting in The Crow is something to behold. And also, like I said, it's Brandon Lee's last movie. And so it just sort of like puts everything into this weird perspective. And sometimes you actually almost feel guilty about watching it. So The Crow gets my number 3 spot for movies about resurrection, because he definitely gets resurrected in this movie.
That reminds me.
Yes.
Stop me if you heard this one.
Okay.
Jesus Christ walks into a hotel. He hands the innkeeper 3 nails and he asks, "Can you put me up for the night?"
Gross.
It's a joke from the movie.
That gets a VII out of 10.
I told you I wasn't good at math.
See what I did there with the Roman numerals? Because it was the Romans that crucified Christ? No? Okay, never mind. Never mind. Never mind. On with your number 3 choice.
All right. My number 3 is going to be a controversial one because, as we've mentioned a few times tonight, we have to ask the question, but did they die?
Well, we don't have to ask it, but we find ourselves asking it anyway because that's how we roll here.
So I think this would be a valid question as we look at my number 3 and have to say, but did you die? I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
Because my number 3 is from Batman Returns, and I'm talking about Selina Kyle.
Okay. Yeah, I can see why this would be slightly, maybe not controversial, but a little bit contentious. Yeah.
I expect a little bit of pushback from the community on this one because they're like, maybe she didn't die. Well, I like to think that she did, and she came back because she used one of her 9 lives, as we see a few times throughout the movie. Yeah, she's definitely should have died from that, but there's another life down, right? And I think in the world of Tim Burton, that's fair. I think it's fair game. So when Max, Shrek, Bruce Wayne, why are you dressed like Batman? Anyway, when Selina's pushed out the of her window, lonely woman, that one, only friends are cats. For some reason, she has a neon sign. It says hello there. So she gets shoved out the window because she saw too much and hits the ground with a big old death-inducing thud. Now, here's the thing that really makes me think, yeah, she was gone. Did she get up? Yes. Was it through the power of kitties licking her face and fingers? Maybe. But what doesn't happen is her having any injuries. So I'm thinking as she comes back from the dead, she's fine. It's like, oh, you died? Well, you'll come back. Don't worry. Your next life will be, you're fixed. And that's what happens. And that's when she becomes Catwoman. So in essence, Selina Kyle did die. And Catwoman was born. And Hello There turned into Hell Here.
Okay.
So number 3, Batman Returns.
Okay. I can see that. I mean, I can sort of see this a little bit. I mean, it does make sense. It totally does make sense. It's just I can definitely see why people would go, well, wait a minute. She's not really Catwoman. I mean, she's not really a Catwoman. But
But again, I give you, the world of Tim Burton, right?
Exactly. I mean, there were giant rubber duckies in that world, so sure, why not? Let's do it. Okay, my number 2 is the movie that I was quoting from the very beginning of this podcast when we talked about being all dead. I mean, I feel like most of the people on my list were actually at one point or other all dead, except for Jonah Hex, but the people that he resurrected were all dead. And maybe possibly Neo, who I just can't quite figure out and don't have enough cookies or time to process. So we'll get to that on another day when I have more cookies and more time. But this one is definitely, I mean, this definitely qualifies. It's called The Princess Bride, and Wesley definitely dies. They kill him. They absolutely kill him. The prince puts the machine to 10. No, not 10. And drains all the life out of him. Well, sucks it out anyway. And yeah, he's dead. But is he all dead? Well, no, not according to Miracle Max, who says there's a huge difference between being all dead and being mostly dead. And thank goodness Wesley was just mostly dead because they were able to bring him back. And then, yes, of course, the rest is history and happily ever after. I actually really love this particular movie as the sort of, the bad guy dies, and um even the reaction of our young reader who's listening, I mean our young listener who's listening to the story, even he says, wait a minute, he died. How could he that doesn't even make any sense. As an excellent leapfrog into the second act of a story, there is nothing better than your main protagonist dying and having to somehow find the insurmountable resources to come back from that. It's just sort of epic. And I love that line, are you all dead or just mostly dead? I mean, like, it's just such a great line. The whole thing is the movie is so fabulous. So The Princess Bride gets my number 2 for Wesley coming back from having all the life sucked out of him.
Again, almost made my list, but I will admit I got stuck on the mostly dead thing.
But he was dead. It's just
Mostly.
He wasn't dead enough not to bring back from the dead. That's all.
Okay. If I thought about this, it definitely would have made my list. It should have made my list in that context, but it unfortunately didn't. So here we are.
But that's okay because it made my list, so it does have representation between the two of us, and it's all good.
Speaking of representation between the two of us, I think it's time for the other crossover on our lists. My number 2 is RoboCop. Why is he my number 2? Well, when it comes to people dying, nobody gets quite killed like Alex Murphy. I mean, Red Foreman kills the crap out of him. I mean, seriously, they just really, really kill him. When it comes to, is he dead? The answer is an emphatic yes. Alex Murphy is totally, completely, 100% dead. But as we saw, corporations of the future have a tendency to finally start recycling something, right? And at least they started with a good cop, I guess. And that's where we get RoboCop, the guy that's there to enforce the law and follow his programming. That's it. That's it.
I,
RoboCop is a one man police force. Go ahead.
I love this movie. I again, I mean, like I said before, I loved it because, you know, he obviously does have humanity left over and attached to him. And I
Mhm.
think the moral of the story is you can't take morality out of a person. It still exists, whether you want it to or not.
Right.
Whatever it is that makes you human doesn't just end just because you add machine parts to it. So
They
I loved that.
they changed the oil, fixed the radiator, but the heart of the machine is still the man.
It's super, super good. All right. My number one
Your number one.
is
Here we go.
okay. Uh, my number one, the person who is basically resurrected, admits to it in the movie, and someone says to our main protagonist, "I thought you were dead," and our main character says, "Yeah, I get that a lot." Can you guess which movie I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, it's Alien 4,
Ah,
tagline Resurrection, and Ripley has been brought back from the dead. How has she been brought back from the dead? Well, she was cloned and recloned and cloned and recloned. And eventually we get Ripley again. It's called Alien 4 Resurrection, and I gotta say, it really was pretty good. It was a good movie. It was fun. It was also one of the most following on the mothering theme that we continually have with the Alien franchise. This one sort of literally moves Ripley into being in the role of being the mother and then having to make a terrible choice where her poor alien child definitely does not get resurrected. But Ripley does survive to tell the tale, so yay. I do actually really like this movie, just as a silly, just from a silly standpoint. It's not going to win any great awards, but Winona Ryder as an android was really good in this movie, and some of the lines are just so great. Also, um, some I there's very few movies where you see certain characters together and you're like, that would never work, right? I mean, who are these people all together? And then you look at it and you're like, wait, Winona Ryder, Sigourney Weaver, Ron Perlman, how did they get all these people all together? Yeah, actually it works really well, amazingly, and they're just such a cast of misfits all together. It was great. So 1997, Alien Resurrection, or lovingly known as Alien 4.
okay. That was quite the surprise.
What did you think was going to be on my list that wasn't on my list?
Well, first of all, Lord of the Rings.
Okay,
Anything
that's
Lord of the
fair.
Rings. And that's probably the most glaring omission. Not that, I mean, because after you explained why it was on your list, it completely makes sense why it didn't. Because you have knowledge that
I'm
disqualified it for you. I get that.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really the only one I can think of that I would think for sure would be on your list. everything else, I know I'm a sucker for, tentpole franchises and big budget movies. I'm spent most of my life watching more of the mainstream things, and it wasn't until the last decade or so that I've gotten into more, or should I say less known things, thanks to as NPR and PBS would say, thanks to people like you, kind of opening my eyes to the wonderful new experiences. That's well, maybe 10 years isn't quite far enough. Yeah, but
But
yeah, that's what it boils down to.
I definitely had people on my list here. I mean, people. I had movies on my list that were definitely franchise. I mean, Alien's a franchise.
Hmm.
Um, uh, The Matrix is a franchise. I guess that's it. I guess just The Matrix and Aliens. Everything else was just kind of a standalone movie. I mean, Jonah
RoboCop
Hex
had
is.
4 movies.
Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, I guess Alex was in most of them.
Yeah, the
Okay.
first 3, were the core RoboCop movies. The one where they made the cartoon and then the toys off of, which is really weird considering what was in the actual original RoboCop movie.
Right.
I mean, I
And
saw it when I was 5.
I mean, it does it yeah. I guess the only reason I don't see it as like a franchise, they just feel like standalone movies is because they don't specifically connect. Like it feels like very separate IPs. I don't know why, but they do.
I get that. Each movie is sort of a standalone story. There's no real serial connection to it. You just see RoboCop's on a new mission. That's I think that's it.
Yeah, yeah. That I guess that's why it kind of seems like they feel standalone. I got to say one more thing about Alien Resurrection
Okay.
because I mentioned that it was like such a quirky sort of all-star cast. I mean, not maybe that's putting it a little bit too crazy, but it felt very like what an eclectic mix of people. In Alien Resurrection, Jensen Ackles was in it. And if you know Supernatural, then you know that Jensen Ackles was the guy that played Dean. And this is before he even started Supernatural. His role was Dead Soldier. He was one of the, anyway, I won't get too far into it, but it was basically an uncredited role that he played in the movie. So even though he's super famous now, he wasn't famous then. But even then, he was part of an all-star cast. I just think that was funny.
Jensen Ackles, That's yeah. So I haven't watched Supernatural, much to the chagrin of my oldest.
Oh boy, we're gonna have to get you on the Supernatural train.
Everyone keeps saying that. Everyone's also saying you need to watch Game of Thrones.
Well, everyone
Do
can be
I?
wrong about that one. They can be wrong about that. That's not everybody loves Game of Thrones, but pretty much everybody that watches Supernatural finds something that they like out of Supernatural.
That's what I hear.
Yeah, I would say you're safer with Supernatural than you are with Game of Thrones.
But as far as the list goes tonight, there were a couple of things that I thought of adding, but then decided, I don't know. And that's basically every um, every time loop movie, right?
Oh yeah.
Whether it's Groundhog Day or Palm Springs or Live, Die, Repeat
Hmm.
or Edge of Tomorrow, as it goes by both titles. That's weird. You know, just a quick tangential thought. Every time I hear the name Edge of Tomorrow, do you know what I think of?
Uh, a soap opera?
I think of Saved by the Bell, the college years.
Oh, oh. I guess I was thinking of what is the soap opera where there's the tomorrow?
Days of Our Lives.
Days of Our Lives.
I don't know.
Okay. I'll take that. Or what is it? There's another one.
All My Children.
One Life to Live.
One Life
Was
Lived.
Trying to remember. I mean,
Well, that
these
would be
go
the
like
opposite of Live, Die, Repeat.
these go back like so far. These go back to like my grandmother's time. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah.
The reason why it reminds me of Saved by the Bell college years is because Edge of Tomorrow, every time it gets mentioned, the thing running through my head is standing on the edge of tomorrow today. It's the theme song for Saved by the Bell of the college years.
Right.
Again, I know I'm like one of 6 people that actually watched it, but I watched it. I remember the theme song. You can send me your thoughts on how weird I am later on. But right now, I got to get to my number 1.
Let's go.
My number 1. Maybe this is a movie I thought would be on yours because it is, I think, a great film as it ties into a grander picture. One of the first movie series that really got me into sort of serialized storytelling. I think one of the first movie series that really adopted, I think, actual serialized storytelling, where it's sort of a main story from the first to the last, sort of. I give you that, sort of. But there's a lot of connective tissue between the movies, is the Star Trek franchise. After, the show went away in the 60s, it came back as movies. And you would see...
So you're saying that Star Trek was actually resurrected?
Star Trek was resurrected as a movie series. And I'm thinking of just changing my number 1 to just Star Trek in general.
I mean, you wouldn't probably be wrong.
But I should keep it to a character, I think. What they did, continuing the story of the crew of the Star Trek Enterprise, in these series, you would see it was just a continuous story. Even, yes, you can watch them all individually and you'll be just fine. But the way, they're, Kirk's promoted or demoted, in movies, and how the actions of one movie carries over to the next one, it was pretty cool to see. And I really enjoyed the storytelling of the movies with the original Star Trek cast. But specifically in regards to this list, we have Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Because in the Wrath of Khan, we lost Spock. Spock dies. And much like Alex Murphy, he died. He dead. And it was a very beautiful moment between Kirk and Spock
as the needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few.
Or the one.
It was very sad. Everybody in the theater was crying.
It was beautifully done. So when the results of when I say the results, I'd say the disaster that was the Genesis project sort of gave hope that Spock might not be as dead as he used to be. They started searching for him. Hence the search for Spock. They find him, but they find that he is not the man he was. like literally not. That his mind is just pretty much a blank slate, which is why in Star Trek 4, when he's still trying to fill in, some of the pieces, and he's not altogether there. He it's fun. It's funny. Love Star Trek 4. I will talk about that movie any chance I get. But this is about Star Trek 3. They find Spock. He's been resurrected, and the real crux of the movie is not only do they have to kind of get his brains back in order, but they also have to deal with the Klingons led by Doc Brown, Christopher Lloyd. So if you ever want to see Christopher Lloyd play a Klingon, boom, Star Trek 3 answers the call. It's a lot of fun. It leads to them, well, let's just say a lot of people didn't keep their rank after this whole ordeal. And now they had to pay the piper eventually, which will come in later movies. Some of it in this one. And it involves another death, the Enterprise. Star Trek 3 is a classic resurrection tale as one man searches for his best friend, a friend that as human as Kirk wanted him to be, he was still always managed to be just what Kirk needed to keep himself and maintain that Kirk swagger. Without Kirk, there's no Spock. Without Spock, there's no Kirk. There's a symbiotic relationship is classic. Which, to go off on just like a 5-second tangent, that's why seeing earlier tales of Spock without Kirk it's just not as intriguing to me, because we know where he ends up. We know where his loyalties are going to lie, even above, the Federation in the future. Seeing him with Pike is just not. It's meh. But that's just me. Star Trek 3.
But we know from the menagerie that they were really close.
Yeah. But that was one episode.
But that doesn't make it not part of the lore. That doesn't make it not canon.
Canon, sure, but it just doesn't have the same impact as years and years of seeing him with Kirk.
Yeah. I mean, poor Anson Mount, though. Playing Pike is tough. No respect. Yeah. No respect.
I'm not saying I dislike Pike. I'm just saying when it comes to relationships, Spock is coming off as a little whorish.
Yeah, he does sort of come off weird. I have to. That's my only critique of Strange New World, Brave New World, Strange New Worlds. It's my only critique of Strange New Worlds. I don't like Spock, but whatever.
And it doesn't still help watching that it. Leonard Nimoy is just GOAT, right?
Yeah, I'm still watching. I mean, I'll watch it until they stop making new shows. So I'm here.
So Star Trek 3, Search for Spock, number 1.
Nice. Well, these were good lists. I feel like we did a good job.
I agree.
Different, but like, each both of us came up with different ideas, but I feel like they worked. They did work. They worked really well.
And it opened up us to some good discussions, I think.
Yeah, definitely, especially about the franchises themselves.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I will run through my movies and then I will tell you what we are going to do for next week. I think you're going to like it.
Okay.
All right. I have number 10, The Matrix. Number 9, Jonah Hex. Number 8, RoboCop. Number 7, The Lazarus Effect. Number 6, Flatliners. Number 5, Tamara. Number 4, Pet Cemetery. Number 3, The Crow. Number 2, The Princess Bride. Number 1, yeah, I get that a lot, Alien 4, Resurrection.
Well, my number 10, Ghost Town. Number 9, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Number 8, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Number 7, Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. Number 6, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Number 5, Avengers, Everything on This Last has a freaking subtitle. Endgame, Avengers Endgame. Number 4, The Matrix. Number 3, Batman Returns. Number 2, RoboCop. And number 1, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. What is our homework, Jen?
All right. So it's, you know, beginning of spring. I mean, winter has officially ended. Uh, Everyone is sort of looking forward. Spring is such a weird time because, like, after Easter, everybody's basically just going, is it June yet? Is it June yet? And I totally get it. I mean, no, actually, I don't because I live in Hawaii and it's wonderful seasonally all year long. But I do understand why people are in a rush to get through to summer. I did used to live in New York, so I remember those days well. So I thought that we would jump ahead a season and do our favorite summer movies. That is, movies that take place in the summer, or the summer is a primary feature. So, as an example, which you could totally use if you wanted to, Sleepaway Camp, which is a scary movie about a serial killer. Not Friday the 13th or anything, but scary. Or something like that, something that specifically features summer as the either season that the movie takes place in, or it's all about.
I already put in my number 1.
Aha! Is it Meatballs?
No, it's not Meatballs.
Okay, just checking. I mean, that's not a Kevin Smith movie, but
When does Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back take place? Never mind.
that would be fun. That would be fun, actually. So next week we will talk all about movies that celebrate the summer.
Yes. I staring directly at my my number 1.
And the fact that you already have your number 1, that bodes very well for the rest of your list.
Or not.
No, it does. It
Sounded
definitely
like Krusty
does.
the Clown laugh there.
If you already have a good number 1, I feel like the rest of your list is just gravy after that. So.
Oh, my number 1 is so good. I kind of wish we had cameras on next week. But we don't do that here.
Well, I'm sure that it's going to be exciting.
I'm already excited.
I bet.
I'm so excited I could eat.
I was just going to mention the fact that, in case you're looking for something to do, you could make a recipe. The I just have to say this. There's a lot of TikToks of people that go through and choose a movie and make a dish from the movie. And I got to say, listen, some people are pretty inventive and really, cool about how they, say that this is what comes from the movie and whatever. But I find it very difficult to understand how they've chosen some of these things. And some of the dishes are so incredibly complicated that I don't think the average person would know how to make them. So if you're looking for something like that, hey, come join me over at moviesandmeals.com, because we do simple recipes, easy to follow, all printed out right there for you. And I guarantee you'll find something to watch and something to make along with it. I am also trying to continue with my Storyteller Power Hour podcast, which hopefully I will get to next week. I am so sorry. I've just been crazy sick and not been able to do it, but I'm hoping to get to it next week. So join me, hopefully, again on Tuesday at 8 o'clock for that. And yeah, join me over at the blog, moviesandmeals.com. How about you, Josh? I heard that there's a great podcast coming up on Friday.
Really, what is it?
I don't know. I just heard there was a great one coming up.
Oh, it might be Kevin Smith's Smodcast.
Ooh, okay.
Or Hollywood Babylon. That's a good one.
I won't watch the Wadcast then, and I'll go ahead and jump over to Kevin Smith's.
Oh, yeah, the what? Yeah. I mean, yeah, the Wadcast. Every Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Right here. Not, well, I guess it depends on where you're watching or listening. The Wadcast is the Writers, Actors, Directors podcast where myself and Mr. Brandon talk about things related to those fields, career fields, as well as, you know, we watch movies and TV too. So we talk about the stuff we watch and the reactions of people online and the outrage over certain things and whether or not we feel it can be justified and whether it's not. We just talk about all sorts of stuff as it relates to creative, whether it's the back end or the front end. That's the Wadcast. And sometimes we speak to a special guest. It doesn't seem like we're going to be doing that this week, but I checked my email today and someone that I reached out to has come back and said they would love to do the show.
Nice.
Not going to say who it is just yet because I want to make sure everything's ironed out, as far as when that's going to happen. And who knows, they might actually listen to the show and say, never mind. Things get a bit crazy sometimes, especially.
We hope
there's
not.
a reason why Brandon's only allowed one F-bomb per episode. Yeah, but you can go to watcomedia.com to find all of the pertinent links to the socials and YouTubes and all of that stuff. Hey, and if you're feeling froggy, if you're feeling very supportive, head to our merch shop where you can find an amazing 10-2-1 t-shirt right there with that. See that logo in the, well, if you're listening to this, you won't see it, but you will see it on your listening device as part of the, the album artwork, that 10-2-1 logo. If you want that on a shirt, go to wildcomedia.com, hit the merchandise link, and, pick up a t-shirt, pick up a mug, whatever you feel like, because at least, like I say all the time, yeah, there's a Patreon, but if you want to, support the show that you dig us, I would rather you have something tangible in your hands that you can hold on to as sort of a way to have something, so that I always recommend people head to the merch shop for that, even though it means, honestly, it's less money, but again, I'd much rather all of you have something tangible to have for that money. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but yeah, that's me in a nutshell. It's a big nutshell. Had a lot of stuff.
It's all good stuff, though.
So, well, here we are, rolling like an hour 45. And what do we do for the next hour, 20 minutes?
We did good tonight. We powered through this list. I think part of the reason we powered through the list is because a lot of these movies, the theme of resurrection is not specifically, like sometimes we wax poetically about certain movies, and some of these movies are a little bit more difficult to wax poetically about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why.
Could be. And
Or
I
maybe
guess
we're just actually getting concise, in which case, geez,
what's wrong with us?
I don't know. I
You,
honestly, we'll need to see what happens next week, um, and get a good count and see what happens. If it happens twice in a row, then we know it's a trend, not just a fluke.
and I hope people don't feel ripped off for not having a 3-hour podcast.
Oh my god. Well,
But then
I
again,
know
I
I
hope people
definitely
find it.
don't.
Then again, I hope people find the brevity refreshing too.
Yeah,
You,
there's a certain charm in being concise. Yeah, definitely.
but I think only us could go, you know, basically running the length of a feature length movie saying, we were brief this week.
But it's true. I mean, it's so true.
It's true. It's true. We went Joel Schumacher running time instead of Peter Jackson running time.
We just like our movies. Oh, you know what? Speaking of Peter Jackson, tomorrow, I told you this before podcast, but tomorrow is the big Return of the King extended cut happening in the theaters. The runtime is 4 hours and 16 minutes long.
So almost
So,
as long as one of our usual shows.
oh, it's going to be a long show. I'm so thankful right now to every movie theater around the country that has put in recliners for just this sort of thing. Thank you, bless you, I love you.
Well,
Because
then I'll take the time to say that Return of the Jedi is going to be returning to theaters for its 40th anniversary, even though it's not.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Mm-hmm. A lot of returns going on.
I did not know that. Yeah, a lot of returns going on. Kind of feels like Macy's right after Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is
Cool.
an absolutely hilarious joke.
Very cool. That's pretty exciting, actually, especially for people that are Star Wars fans who were too young to see this in the theaters when they, because they were too young or not aware,
Maybe
or
that should
mom and
be
dad didn't
another
like
one
Star
of our.
Wars.
At some point down the road, I don't know when, I will be doing. Give us the homework of movies that you would like to see re-released for a theatrical run because you didn't get to see it the first time.
Ooh. Yeah, okay. Well, all right. I mean, yeah, if we didn't get to see them, okay, that's fine. If we were too young to see them, I'm not doing that because I have this thing about expressing how old I am. I already feel old enough.
Well, you're only 30. You got plenty of years left.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay.
You're
Well,
welcome.
yeah, let's just go with that. Yeah, let's just go with that. That sounds great. Perfect. I love it. Okay.
I remember seeing Back to the Future in theaters.
I actually didn't see
ago.
Back to the Future in theaters. Actually didn't see it in theaters. You know what I did see in theaters though? I mean, obviously not the original run, but you know what I did used to watch in theaters? Every weekend, my mom and my aunt would drop the kids, myself and my cousins, off at this local theater, and the theater would have a double feature, and the double feature was inevitably some monster movie, some kaiju movie duo. So it would be like, Mothra, or it would be, Godzilla versus Mecha Godzilla, whatever. It was always something that was related to some crazy giant kaiju, or um there was a couple of other big giant monster movies that we saw too. But I was thinking, those things don't happen anymore. First of all, you don't just drop your kids off at the movie theater because you'd get arrested. Secondly, um, they don't show double features anymore ever. Like, I haven't seen a double feature and I don't even know how long. Granted, I don't live in middle America, so maybe it's still happening there, but I have not seen any kind of movie theater having a double feature in forever. So I'm at least that old.
Well, I would love to own like something else you don't see anymore is a second run theater.
Oh yeah.
For those of you that don't know, second run theater, a movie will do its theatrical run, make its bank, and you know make its way to, at the time, like home video, right? This was long before streaming was even thought of. But sort of in between that, and sometimes a little bit of a crossover with the home video release, there would be these theaters where they would move to, but tickets would be like $2. And it's just sort of this is your last chance to see it in theaters. Because this was also before they just, did all sorts of, hey, we're going to show this in the theater. Um, and then
This was in the days
anniversaries.
before things went to streaming content faster than, I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, stuff comes out on streaming content faster than it used to come out on videotape.
Sometimes it's day and date of the theatrical release
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yep.
But I would love to own a second run theater to where you just, you pick the movies you want to show, and maybe you throw an old one in there every now and then, maybe put a double feature with a new release, something like that, where if something is thematically relevant to a new release, or I say a newer release that you're getting in a second run theater, you just go ahead and team it up with like new Halloween movie. Play the original Halloween movie in front of it. Why not? That's what I would do.
Yeah. Yeah, the days of actually owning a theater are sort of over. You kind of can't just own your own private theater. It has to be property of, there's very few independent theaters out there. Some, but not many.
We have a great one here. I'll give Jacksonville that much. Sunray, shout out. Much love. We get a lot of cool events there.
Nice.
Wow, we still on the air.
Just trying to get more time. Just trying to get more time. Well, this has been been very fun. I mean, the list was fun, and so was the conversation afterwards. Yes, very. And it didn't even make me feel old this time, so
that's good. That's always good.
It's always a plus when I don't feel old. Yes.
So I guess, kids, we gave you about 2 hours worth of content tonight. I think we're going to call it. The only thing left is, I guess, say goodnight, Jen.
Good night, Jen.